Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a source in front of us today that, well, it really acts like a blueprint of professional thinking. It shows us exactly what separates, high performance from struggle when you're tackling these complex business scenarios.
That's right. We're looking at the examiner's report for the ACCA Strategic Business Leader, or SBL, December 2024 exam. Think of it as the official post-game analysis, really revealing the plays that worked and, well, the ones that didn't.
So our mission in this deep dive is to peel back the layers of this report. We want to extract the really critical insights about common pitfalls, understand why candidates struggled in certain areas, and ultimately see what the examiners were truly looking for. It's kind of about getting inside the mind of the assessment process.
Exactly. And this isn't just about knowing the syllabus content, is it? It's about understanding how to apply that knowledge under pressure. And this report gives us a unique window into where that application sometimes breaks down.
Okay, let's unpack this report then. Starting with the overall picture. When the examiners looked across all the thousands of scripts for December's SBL exam, what were the major recurring themes? What were candidates consistently getting wrong?
Well, the report paints a pretty clear picture, actually. And it suggests that the core issues weren't really a lack of knowledge about, say, business models, but rather a failure in how that knowledge was applied to this specific case study, which was BAGO.
Right, a failure in application. How did that show up?
Most significantly, I'd say candidates just didn't use the exhibit information enough. They failed to ground their answers in the relevant data and specifics provided about BAGO. They might make a perfectly valid theoretical point, but they wouldn't back it up with evidence from the exhibits.
Okay, so it wasn't enough to just know that a strategy exists. You had to show how BAGO was dealing with it, using BAGO's numbers or, circumstances from the case.
Precisely. And linked to that, a huge problem was candidates answering a task they hoped would be set, rather than the one actually in front of them. It really seemed like they arrived with pre-prepared answers that they tried to sort of force-fit, instead of truly engaging with the specific question asked in the exam.
That sounds like a classic mistake, bringing a hammer when the task really needed a screwdriver.
Absolutely. And compounding that lack of original application, the report highlighted that many candidates simply copied and pasted information, like directly from the pre-seen material or the exhibits.
Oh, really? Just copy-paste?
Yeah. And look, that wasn't analysis. It was just lifting text. It earned very few marks, if any, because it just doesn't demonstrate understanding or critical thought relevant to the task.
So summarizing or maybe paraphrasing is okay, but straight copying is basically wasted effort.
Exactly. And this failure to process and apply information ties directly into another general weakness: the inability to properly develop points in their arguments. Candidates would often, list points, but didn't explain the significance to BAGO, didn't discuss the consequences for the company based on the case details, or provide relevant examples from the case material.
It sounds like they stopped maybe one or two steps short of a complete answer. They identified the what, but didn't explain the so what or what next for BAGO.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. The examiners also noted that some candidates clearly hadn't made use of key preparation resources available on the ACCA Hub, like the SBL guidance or specific articles, and those are designed specifically to help candidates understand the exam's requirements and approach.
Missing out on official guidance, that seems like a bit of a self-inflicted wound, doesn't it?
It really can be. Poor time management was also evident. Some candidates spent way too long planning or got stuck just repeating the same points over and over, which left insufficient time to fully develop later parts of their answer.
Right, running out of steam.
Yeah, and perhaps most fundamentally, there was evidence of candidates not reading the task requirements carefully enough, just not reading properly, which led to incomplete answers or missing the specific nuance of what was being asked.
Okay, that gives us a clear picture of the broad issues: failure to apply, failure to use the case, poor task interpretation, and time management. But the SBL exam has this distinctive marking scheme, focusing on both technical and professional skills marks. Let's look at what the report says about how candidates earned, or perhaps failed to earn, these different types of marks.
Yeah, this is crucial because it explains why those issues we just discussed were so damaging. The report is very specific about technical marks. They are not awarded for just explaining theory or, rote learning.
So just defining the BCG Matrix doesn't earn you technical marks?
Correct. No. To earn technical marks, your points must directly address the requirement, show why they are significant to BAGO, and be grounded in the specific issues of the task and the case material. The report actually clarifies that up to 2 marks are available for a well-developed point.
2 marks for just 1 point. That's quite significant. What does well-developed mean in this context then?
Well, it means you've evaluated the significance of the point. You've used specific information from the BAGO case to support it. You've explained the consequences for BAGO and potentially given relevant examples from the case material. It's really about demonstrating deep application to that specific context.
Okay, so identifying a potential risk isn't enough. You have to explain how that risk specifically affects BAGO based on the case and what the likely consequences would be for BAGO.
Exactly. And the report explicitly calls out that failure to develop points was a key weakness, particularly in Task 2A, where candidates identified points about value creation, but didn't take that crucial next step to evaluate their impact on BAGO's value creation using the case details. They just stopped short.
Okay, so technical marks are about the quality and depth of applied analysis to the case. What about professional skills marks? What are they looking for there?
Right, these are awarded for how you present your answer and demonstrate those core business skills. It's about clear structure, good presentation, and using the right tone for the specified recipient. Maybe it's a report or briefing notes or presentation slides.
So if the task asks for a report, formatting it as a report with proper headings and structure is actually part of the marks.
Yes, absolutely. Candidates need to read the technical and professional requirements together. That required output format isn't just a suggestion. It's directly tied to the professional skills marks. And maybe even more importantly, you have to demonstrate the specific professional skill requested for that task. That might be analysis, commercial acumen, communication, or skepticism.
You have to actively show the skill, not just know its definition.
Precisely. The report gives a standout example from Task 3B on disruptive technologies, where the required skill was skepticism. Candidates were expected to challenge the CEO's negative opinion on these technologies, not just sort of nod along and agree with them.
Challenge the CEO, okay.
Yeah, the report defines skepticism here as adopting a questioning attitude or doubt about information presented. It's not just about asking questions. You needed to push back on the CEO's view by presenting alternative perspectives or potential positive impacts, based on the case material, of course.
That's a powerful example. It kind of flips the script. You're not just absorbing information. You're critically evaluating it and demonstrating that critical evaluation in your response. It's not about asking why, but about presenting the however or but consider.
Exactly. Showing that professional doubt and critical engagement. That's what they wanted to see.
Okay. With that understanding of the marking and the general issues, let's dive into the specifics of how candidates performed on each task, starting with Task 1, which involved analyzing BAGO's service portfolio using the BCG Matrix. What happened there?
Well, this task highlighted some, let's say, foundational struggles. Many candidates had difficulty with the concept of relative market share, which is, market share compared to the largest competitor in that market.
Right.
This confusion led to quite a few incorrect categorizations within the BCG matrix.
Ah, okay. Getting that key input wrong would certainly throw off the whole model.
It really did. And beyond just the classification, there was a lack of strategic depth. Candidates often gave very generic recommendations for managing the portfolio, like invest in stars, divest dogs, the standard stuff. Instead of proposing appropriate strategies specific to BAGO and the service's actual positions, using those case details.
So not just applying the theory, but applying it strategically to BAGO's specific situation. That was the missing piece.
Right. The report also noted something quite surprising, a lack of recognition that BAGO's portfolio lacked typical cash cows. Many candidates tried to sort of force services into that category just to fill the matrix, rather than acknowledging this strategic gap, which in itself is a critical observation.
That's interesting. So the analysis should also highlight what's missing from the standard model based on the case evidence.
Exactly. And consistent with the general issues we talked about, weak analysis skills were evident here too.
Yeah.
Candidates often fail to use specific numbers from Exhibit 1 to back up their BCG classifications and the points they made afterwards.
Right. Okay, moving to Task 2A, this one asks candidates to analyze how a proposed food delivery service would add value and which of the 6 capitals it would relate to. The framework looking at value beyond just financial, human, social, manufacturing, intellectual, natural, financial.
Yeah, the strong answers here successfully analyzed how the food delivery service would create value for BAGO and its stakeholders.
Yeah.
And they made clear links to the relevant capitals. They connected the operational details from the exhibit to this integrated reporting framework really well.
And the report mentioned a particularly weak area here within the capitals.
Yes. Manufacturing capital was apparently the worst answered area. Candidates really struggled to recognize tangible assets relevant to the new service, like the proposed new manufacturing facility mentioned in the case as falling under this capital.
That seems quite straightforward physical assets. Why do you think candidates might have missed that?
It might relate back to overthinking, maybe? Or perhaps just failing to ground the theoretical model in the concrete details of the case. They probably knew about the facility but didn't connect it properly to manufacturing capital. And echoing the general theme again, weaker answers just repeated points from the exhibit about the food delivery service without evaluating their relevance or impact on value creation for Bago.
Just describing the service instead of actually analyzing its value impact.
Precisely. Other issues included using inappropriate headings for the response format, only partially using the required 6 capitals framework, or essentially just doing a brain dump of knowledge about the capitals without applying it specifically to that food delivery service proposal.
Okay. Then task 2B asked for non-financial KPIs for this food delivery service. What were the main struggles here?
A very common problem was describing how a KPI would be measured, rather than explaining its purpose and usefulness to BCG in monitoring the performance of the new service.
So saying something like, we will use GPS to track drivers, instead of explaining why tracking delivery time is crucial, like monitoring efficiency or ensuring customer satisfaction.
Exactly that. Candidates also lost marks for suggesting closely related or repetitive measures. For example, listing both time to delivery and speed of delivery as separate KPIs, or maybe customer satisfaction and customer complaints, which are, essentially measuring the same underlying concept just from different angles.
Redundant measures not really providing new insight.
Right. Identifying and justifying a sufficient number of relevant, non-financial KPIs was also a challenge for many. And again, we saw candidates copying pre-seen KPIs from Bago's existing taxi service, like rides completed, without adapting them properly for a food delivery service context. They should have been thinking about metrics relevant to, say, packages or meals delivered, not people being transported.
Right, the context is key. Okay, let's look at task 3A, which focused on the benefits and risks of cloud technology for Bago.
Overall performance here was described as disappointing in the report. Candidates were generally better at listing benefits than they were at identifying risks.
Why the difficulty with risks, do you think?
Well, the report states candidates struggled to identify specific cloud-related risks beyond the obvious general cybersecurity concerns. This suggested a lack of understanding of the broader risk landscape for a business like Bago that would become heavily reliant on technology infrastructure, specifically the cloud.
So maybe not thinking enough about things like vendor lock-in or data privacy regulations, integration challenges, reliance on internet connectivity, perhaps.
Exactly. Those specific risks associated with a cloud migration or cloud operation, not just generic IT problems that could apply anywhere. Many focused on general IT risks instead of those particular to cloud computing. Also, for this task, which involved presentation slides, the accompanying notes were often far too brief, just bullet points or note form, instead of being fully explained points suitable for supporting someone who's actually giving the presentation.
So the format and the purpose of the notes weren't quite understood.
Correct. That seemed to be the issue.
And finally, task 3B. The report singles this out as the worst answered task overall, dealing with disruptive technologies and responding to the CEO's somewhat negative opinion on them. What went wrong here?
Well, this task was where the required professional skill, skepticism, became the major stumbling block for many. The primary reason for failure, according to the report, was that many candidates simply agreed with the CEO's negative comments about disruptive technologies instead of challenging his view.
Wow. They failed to demonstrate the required skepticism by presenting counter-arguments or alternative perspectives.
Precisely. By just agreeing with the CEO that these technologies were bad, they severely limited their ability to earn marks, both technical and professional marks, for discussing the potential positive impacts or opportunities these technologies might present for Bago. And that discussion was a core part of the task requirement.
That's fascinating. So the task wasn't just discuss disruptive tech. It was discuss disruptive tech while demonstrating skepticism towards this specific negative view.
Exactly. It tested their ability to critically evaluate a senior figure's potentially flawed perspective, using their own knowledge and the case context. Answers were also often quite imbalanced, dedicating significant time to maybe one technology mentioned, like driverless vehicles, but then giving very limited coverage to others like IoT or clean air zone systems.
Yeah.
And There were common misinterpretations of the exhibit information, leading to some unrealistic suggestions, like assuming Vago employed its drivers directly when the case said they were independent contractors, or suggesting Vago could somehow prevent local authority clean air zone schemes from being implemented.
Right, so fundamental misunderstandings of the case as well. Wow, that deep dive into the specific task feedback is incredibly revealing. So bringing all these insights together, the general weaknesses, the marking scheme nuances, the specific task struggles, what are the core lessons here for anyone, whether they're facing a similar professional assessment or just trying to apply business concepts better in their work?
I think the overarching message from this report is crystal clear. Success in these kinds of professional assessments hinges on your ability to apply your knowledge rigorously and analytically to a specific, complex case study. It's just not enough to know the models or theories in abstract.
It's about taking that knowledge and using the specific details from the case, the names, the numbers, the particular circumstances of Vago to build your arguments and demonstrate their relevance, really getting into the weeds of the case.
Absolutely. And just as critical is demonstrating the required professional skills, whether it's analysis, commercial acumen, or, crucially, as we saw, being able to be skeptical and challenge a given viewpoint when it's appropriate. These are really non-negotiable skills the examiners are looking for. The report shows candidates knew about concepts like skepticism, but they didn't actually do it.
So understanding these specific pitfalls, like not developing points fully, copying texts instead of analyzing, or failing to apply a required skill, like skepticism provides a powerful roadmap, doesn't it? It shows you not just what concepts to study, but how you need to interact with information and demonstrate your professional capabilities under pressure. It's really about bridging that gap between knowing and doing.
It provides that vital insight into the examiner's expectations and what truly distinguishes a strong, professionally minded response from a weaker one.
Yeah. This deep dive into the SBL examiner's report has certainly highlighted the gap that often exists between theoretical knowledge and practical application. We've seen how failure to use case specifics, develop points fully, or demonstrate required skills like skepticism tripped up so many candidates.
It's a potent reminder, I think, that professional competence is often less about pure recall and much more about considered, applied judgment in context.
So here's a thought to leave you with. This report shows a clear pattern of candidates knowing the tools, things like the BCG Matrix, the 6 capitals, KPIs, but really struggling to use them effectively within a specific, complex context like Vago, or failing to adopt the professional mindset, like skepticism, that the task explicitly required. What does this performance tell us about the real challenge in developing strategic business leaders? Is it just about acquiring knowledge, or is it more about cultivating the ability to truly deploy that knowledge and mindset effectively in ambiguous real-world situations? It seems the assessment is less about what you've memorized and maybe more about the professional you're becoming.